Imagine, if you will, an entire planet encased in ice. It's hypothesized that's what Earth looked like roughly 700 million years ago. However, as carbon dioxide accumulated due to volcanism, this snowball Earth thawed, and at the base of the Ediacaran period we observed some of the first true animals. These early animals were mostly flat, worm-like creatures that we can't classify into any modern group. It wasn't until about 540 million years ago that many modern phyla appeared. In an evolutionary event called the Cambrian explosion, which is often linked to increased oceanic oxygenation, animals diversified significantly over 20 to 30 million years. They expanded into new niches, increased bioturbation, and experienced an evolutionary arms race due to predation. Most Cambrian formations preserve organisms with hard parts, but in a few localities, perfect conditions like anoxia and reduced bacterial decay led to the preservation of some amazing soft-bodied fossils. We'll be looking at one of these sites, the Burgess Shale.
The Burgess Shale is located in British Columbia over several outcrops in Yoho National Park. While today it sits around 50 degrees north, in the Cambrian it was just south of the equator. At the time, this landmass was underwater, bordered by a large 200-meter cliff called the Cathedral Escarpment. Most animals were found within about 400 kilometers of the shoreline on a shallow tropical platform. Calm waters and weak currents provided excellent habitat for oceanic life. Let us take you back 508 million years to a shallow reef overlooking a deep ocean basin. Just 30 million years after the Cambrian explosion began, the Burgess Shale teemed with life. Let's look at some of the fascinating organisms calling this sea home. Some may look quite familiar, while others seem unlike anything on Earth today.
First, let's look at an organism covering much of the seafloor, the humble cyanobacteria. Though it may not appear special, this photosynthesizer, called Morania, gives us important hints about the environment here, and may have aided in the exceptional preservation. Morania colonies, often arranged in flat sheets, anchored down the substrate, allowing other organisms to burrow down into it. They were also a major food source for grazers such as Wiwaxia.
The Burgess Shale was also home to several dozen sponge genera. Here, sponges were the main reef builders, just like today's corals. They were suspension feeders, extracting food particles from water passing through their walls in the same way as modern sponges. Here we see two common demosponges, the cone-shaped Hazalia and the branching Voxia.
In the Cambrian, we saw the emergence of the iconic trilobites. By this time, they'd already diversified into many forms, like the carnivorous Olenoides and the deposit feeder Tychignostus. There's even evidence for some trilobite species being cannibals, and many fossils have damage consistent with durophagy. Trilobites would soon dominate the Paleozoic seas, along with another common phylum, Brachiopoda.
Although it looks like a trilobite, Marella was a different kind of early arthropod and the most common here. It had a triangular head with antenna and two pairs of spines curving along its body and 26 body segments, each with a pair of legs. It was a deposit feeder, crawling along the seafloor and using projections on its last few segments to form a net which caught food particles as the animal moved.
One animal responsible for bioturbation, Otoia, was a stem priapulid worm. Relatively common, Otoia lived in deep burrows in both shallow and deep water. It had a retractable proboscis lined with 28 rows of teeth which could be everted to hook prey. It was an active predator, with brachiopod shells and trilobites commonly found in its gut, although the occasional large Wiwaxia sclerite suggests that Otoia also scavenged. Priapulid worms like Otoia still exist today.
Hallucigenia is one of the most iconic Burgess Shale animals, and for good reason. It was unlike anything alive today, with 7 pairs of spines and tentacles along its cylindrical body. It was initially reconstructed waddling on its spines, using its tentacles to feed from the water column, but we now know this was upside down. The tentacles had claws and were legs, while the spines were likely for defense. Strangely, Hallucigenia also had spines inside its mouth, although it was probably not a predator. These spines could have helped it suck in food, and its eyes were simple. Its legs were unjointed, so it probably moved using hydrostatic pressure. Despite its strange appearance, Hallucigenia is related to modern velvet worms.
Another strange animal was Wiwaxia, a creature covered in plates called sclerites, which together make up the sclerotome. Some large adults also had spines extending from the body. Interestingly, a fossil of a brachiopod attached to a Wiwaxia spine also suggests symbiotic relationships were present as early as the Cambrian, and the earliest example of commensalism between sessile and mobile species. It had a foot surrounded by gills, and a mouth similar to a molluscan radula, with rows of teeth. The morphology of this radula suggests Wiwaxia was a grazing deposit feeder. There's also debate over whether it was more closely related to mollusks or annelids. It had a radula and a foot like modern mollusks, but the morphology of the sclerotome is closer to annelids. However, the sclerotome also has needle-shaped crystals not observed in Burgess Shale annelids. It also shares similarities with polyplacophorian mollusks, supporting a molluscan affinity. As the sclerites have evidence of microvilli secretion, Uwaxia at least belongs to Lophotrochozoa.
Perhaps one of the strangest creatures here is Opabinia, with its 5 stalked eyes and trunk-like proboscis ending in a claw, likely used to grab prey and push it into the mouth. Its body had 15 segments, with gills on the back edge of each, and it had swimming flaps. Its eyes were compound-like in many modern arthropods, though its exact taxonomy is uncertain. Most paleontologists agree it's a stem euarthropod, probably in the superphylum Panarthropoda. Making taxonomic analysis harder is the fact that Opabinia is also rare in the Burgess Shale and has low known diversity.
The biggest Cambrian animal was Anomalocaris, another stem euarthropod. Unlike Opabinia, it had 2 large jointed feeding appendages. Its mouth was a ring of 3 large plates and many smaller ones. It was streamlined, with side flaps that suggest it was a fast, strong swimmer. It also had stalked compound eyes, each with 16,000 hexagonal lenses. Since the lens angle in a compound eye relates to the eye's focusing power, Anomalocaris might have had better vision than even many modern arthropods. Eye morphology also implies the animal lived in the well-lit photic zone. As Anomalocaris is a stem arthropod and not in the crown group, this implies compound eyes evolved early. Efficient vision is important for active hunters. Although it was the top predator, little is known about its exact diet, and there's considerable debate on whether it could eat trilobites, as it lacked a way to crack shells.
It may be surprising to discover that our closest Cambrian relative, the ancestor of all vertebrates, was the tiny Pikaia. Although first thought to be a type of annelid, it has a primitive notochord, a nerve cord, and myomeres, which are chordate features. It was laterally flattened and probably swam side to side like an eel. These myomeres were straight, not angled in a way that would make them strong like in modern lancelets. This means Pikaia was not a strong or fast swimmer and probably hid near the sea floor instead of swimming in open water where predators were. Its gills may also have been exposed, which may imply it lived in low oxygen water and couldn't get by with oxygen absorption through skin alone like modern lancelets do.
Every once in a while, mudslides buried these wonderful creatures at the bottom of the ocean basin, where they were carbonized and remained for millions of years. Plate tectonics gradually moved them into the northern hemisphere, and uplift brought them to their current position. The Cambrian explosion saw the appearance of many familiar phyla, as well as the ecological niches we see today: producers, grazers, detritivores, filter feeders, and carnivores. These organisms and many more show the diversity of body plans arising from the Cambrian explosion. Life in the Cambrian oceans may seem unlike anything before or after, at a time when life was figuring out what worked and what didn't. But though many of the alien-like creatures and their adaptations are gone, we can still see their descendants on Earth today. A simple trip to the beach will show that in 540 million years, some things about life on this Earth haven't changed at all.